I picked her up the way I picked up everything else that made me money, and didn't ask questions. Sealed in a crate marked machine parts, in the hold of a ship I'd bought half legal in a yard on Corvassa Reach. That's the truth of it, however it sounds now. I was hauling salvage circuitry for a buyer 3 systems out, and somewhere between the loading dock and orbit, my manifest picked up 40 extra kilos I never signed for. I found her when the crate started humming. Not crying, not banging. Humming. Low, off the register of anything human, like a tuning fork pressed against my back teeth. I cracked the lid expecting a busted power cell. Instead, there was a kid, small, gray-blue skin, gone paler with cold, fingers too long for her wrists, curled around a strip of insulation cable, like it was the only warm thing she'd found in the crate. She looked up at me with eyes the color of engine coolant and didn't make a sound. I want to say I thought it through. I didn't. I closed the crate lid halfway, gave her air and a blanket, and went back to the cockpit to pretend I hadn't just become a smuggler of a different kind of cargo. That lasted about 4 hours, long enough to run the numbers on turning around, on hailing the nearest customs relay, on doing any of the 6 or 7 sensible things a man in my position was supposed to do with an unregistered alien child in his hold. I did none of them. I went back down with a ration bar and a bowl of water, like she was a stray dog I'd found in a loading bay, which, in fairness, wasn't far from the truth of how I was thinking about her at the time. She wouldn't come out of the crate, wouldn't touch the ration bar either, not until I'd eaten a piece of it myself in front of her, slow, hands where she could see them. Whatever had happened to her before that crate, somebody had taught her that food offered by strangers wasn't always food. Her name, when she finally gave it to me 3 days out, was Nith. I called her Wisp, because she moved through the ship like she wasn't quite touching it, barefoot on cold decking, one hand always trailing the bulkheads like she was reading them. Took me a week to understand what she was doing. Her people, wherever they'd come from, and she never said outright, just gestured at a smear of stars past the viewport and went quiet, could feel machinery the way the rest of us feel a pulse. Every hum and stutter in the marrow run's guts, she felt it before the ship's own diagnostics did. I started leaving the panel covers off after that, half by accident, half because I liked watching her work. She'd crouch by an open conduit with her head tipped like she was listening to a conversation only she could hear, and her fingers would find the exact wire, the exact valve, the exact loose fitting that had been bothering me for months without my knowing why. She never explained it in words I understood. Once, when I asked how she knew a coupling was about to fail 3 decks down, she just pressed my hand flat against the bulkhead and waited. I felt nothing. She looked at me like I was the one who was strange, and maybe to her I was, deaf to a whole language the ship had been speaking the entire time. We fell into something like a routine. She ate at the little fold-down table across from the pilot's seat, always facing the door. She slept in the crew berth I never used, door open, light on low. She didn't talk about where she'd come from, and I didn't push, because I'd learned a long time ago that people, and I was starting to think of her as people, whatever the manifest would have called her, tell you what they're ready to tell you, and not a syllable before. What she did tell me, in fragments over those first weeks, was enough. A home she wasn't going back to, a journey that had gone wrong, more than one crate before mine. That should have told me what she was worth. It did tell me, eventually, when the bounty flyer came through on a relay 3 jumps later, a photograph rendered close enough to hers that my stomach dropped, a number attached to it that would have cleared every debt I owed, and bought me a new engine besides. Recovery only, it said. No questions on condition. I read it twice in the cockpit with her asleep 2 decks below, wrapped in the blanket I'd given her, and I deleted it before she woke. I told myself it was because a debt collector doesn't get to also be the kind of man who sells a scared kid to strangers with guns. That was true. It wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was simpler and worse. I liked having her aboard. She fixed things I'd been ignoring for years. Patched a coolant leak with 2 fingers and a hum, quieted a servo that had rattled since before I owned the ship. She didn't talk much. When she did, it landed. The bounty hunters found us anyway, 6 days out from the border relay, which told me somebody on Corvassa Reach had a loose mouth and an empty pocket. 3 of them, professional, boarding pod quiet, cutting through my aft airlock like it was paper. I had 1 sidearm, half a magazine, and no illusions about my odds against 3 men who did this for a living. What I didn't have, and what I'd forgotten to account for, was Wisp. She was already moving when I got to the corridor, flat against the bulkhead, palm pressed to a junction box, and the whole aft section went black and silent between one breath and the next. Not a system failure, a decision. She'd found the exact seam in the Marrow Run's power grid that would drop every light and every door lock on that deck at once, and she'd done it faster than I could have drawn a schematic. The hunters, blind in a ship they didn't know, started shouting into comms that weren't picking up her interference. I heard one of them walk straight into a bulkhead in the dark. I got the drop on the first one by sound alone. A boot scrape against decking he didn't know had a lip in it, the same lip I'd cursed and never fixed for 2 years. He went down before he knew I was there. The second came at me by the light of his own weapon, sweeping the dark in a corridor that used to be straight, and, thanks to a bulkhead she'd sealed halfway down, now wasn't. He hit the wall he wasn't expecting, and I put him down before he found his footing on a deck she'd made unfamiliar to him, and familiar to me. The third one had better instincts than the other 2. He found the emergency override on the junction box she'd been working, got half the lights back, and put a round through the bulkhead close enough that I felt the heat of it pass my ear. I put him down at the doorway to the crew berth, her berth, and I understood, with a clarity that scared me more than the gunfire had, exactly why my hands weren't shaking. He ran after that, the one smart enough to find the override, and I let him go. Wherever he crawled back to, he could tell whoever sent him that recovery-only jobs on my ship come with a body count now. When the lights came back up, she was sitting against the junction box with her knees pulled in, hands shaking the way they never had over engine work. First time I'd seen her scared since the crate. I sat down next to her on the cold decking and didn't say anything smart, because there wasn't anything smart to say. I just put my hand flat on the deck plate beside hers, the way she did it, and after a while her fingers found mine instead of the metal. "You didn't have to do that," I told her. She looked at me like the question didn't make sense to her, like there'd never been another option worth considering, and maybe there hadn't. Not for her. Not anymore for me either. I never turned in that bounty flyer. I never sold the intel. Never let another crate go unopened on my ship again without checking what, or who, might be inside it. Wisp stayed aboard the Marrow Run 2 more years, until a quiet trade came through with people of her own kind, who could actually keep her safer than one broke smuggler and an aging freighter ever could. I flew her to the handoff myself, refused payment twice, and made the buyer's crew swear an oath I had no legal right to extract. She hugged me before she left, arms too long for the gesture, and told me the ship still hummed wrong in the portside coolant line, 3rd valve back. I fixed it that night, alone, and left it running a little rough on purpose. Some sounds you don't want gone all the way. I've hauled a lot of cargo since. Never opened a crate again without checking it first. Not because I was scared of what might crawl out, but because once, a very long time ago, something did, and it turned out to be the only good decision I ever stumbled into by accident. I didn't save her, not really. She'll tell you herself, if you ever meet her, all grown into whatever her people grow into, that I just happened to be standing in the hallway when she decided I was worth keeping,